Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I hope the weekend was great. It's been raining most of the weekend over here, and I see it's raining down in South Africa as well, and we're all flooded. Let me start with obviously the key currency to keep an eye on in the next few sessions. That's the Renminbi. 26th of August, I said it's being used as a shock absorber and a very precise first responder to Trump. And GoldmanSachs is saying it could trade down to 685 if negotiators agree to roll back the list 4A tariffs. That's a big if, and we'll have to see how that pans out. This is a chart currently trading, let me take a quick peep, at 703.40, pretty well behaved for now, and as I said, it is the most important currency to watch right now. US jobs trounced forecasts with the 266,000 gain. Wages also heated up, roared back in November as unemployment matched a half-century low and wages topped estimates, giving the Federal Reserve more reason to hold interest rates steady after 3 straight cuts. Payrolls jumped 266,000. It was the first full month that General Motors workers returned to work after a 40-day strike. That alone added 41,300. The jobless rate dropped to 3.5%, matching the lowest since 1969. Average hourly earnings climbed 3.1% from a year earlier, exceeding projections. It was a significant surprise. No one predicted that kind of number. 15th of July, when the Fed had embarked on the rate cut cycle, mid-cycle adjustment they were calling it then, I said stoking up the fire with rate cuts is a very dangerous situation because the Fed will need to be raising rates into the election, something that will turn Trump apoplectic, I am sure. That prediction does not look so far-fetched anymore. And I said specifically with respect to the US, stoking up the fire with the rate cuts is a very dangerous situation. Short-end rates breaking out now, that's from simple trends, that's the best indicator of where we're headed, and it remains really the proxy instrument for US interest rates. 24th of June, I was saying we're in nosebleed territory. This is voodoo economics, you know, that was ahead of the rate cutting cycle that we've seen. I interviewed William Pike, who's an author and the director of the Radio Africa Group and was the first journalist to go and visit Museveni, who was then in the bush fighting Milton Obote. And this made William's career. He went deep in the bush, walked and met him, and then spent 2 days with him. And he's written a book, and we spoke about that period when Museveni came to power, and it's well worth listening to if you've got some time. Salman Rushdie sprung to my mind. Ours is the most cryptic of centuries, its true nature, a dark secret. And then I came across a triple header, Okavango, River of Dreams. This is Derek and Beverly Joubert, and it's on YouTube. It's in 3 parts, and they are stunning photographers and cinematographers, and really one of the most beautiful wildlife documentaries that I've seen have come from them. They've spent, I think, since they got married, they've been deep in the Okavango. And you can see that by the detail, what they film, because you wouldn't get that by just dropping yourself in for a month or so. Perfectly timed action shot by photographer Claudio Piccoli. This is amazing. Dog catching a frisbee, that was by Meredith Frost, and an extraordinary action photograph. Now, this whole banana story, it's just fantastic, isn't it? See you after jail, guys. Art world stunned after man eats $120,000 banana duct taped to a wall. This banana was duct taped to a wall, sold for $120,000 at Art Basel, Miami Beach. Then on Saturday at around 1:45 p.m, the art world was shocked when a random man, allegedly a performance artiste, ate said duct-taped banana. David Datuna, in front of a stunned convention full of art lovers, most of whom had no idea whether they were witnessing even more art or just some clueless rando eating the world's most discussed art exhibit, the gallery told the Miami Herald. Perotine gallery spokesman Lucien Terra told the Herald that Datuna did not destroy the artwork because the banana is the idea. You can't make this up. And here's a short video from Isaac Carrasco, a guy at Art Basel pulled a banana worth $120,000 off the wall and ate it. Here's him being escorted out. Political Reflections, I watched a really interesting in-depth interview on Democracy Now! With Arundhati Roy. It's hard to communicate the scale and the shape of this shadow taking India over. Well worth listening to. She really is not only an accomplished author, but a great contemporary commentator on what's happening. The dark power of words has become the defining feature of Mr. Trump's bid for the White House to a degree rarely seen in modern politics. This is a New York Times article from December 5, 2015. There is something going on with him that we don't know about, Mr. Trump said of the president, drawing applause from the crowd in Washington. Relies on potent language to connect with and often stoke the fears and grievances of Americans. He has a particular habit of saying you and we as he inveighs against a dangerous them or unnamed other, usually outsiders like illegal immigrants. They're pouring in, Syrian migrants, young, strong men and Mexicans, but also leaders of both political parties. He appeals to the masses, makes them feel powerful again. We need to build a wall on the Mexican border, not I, but we. In another pattern, Trump tends to attack a person rather than an idea or situation, like calling political opponents stupid at least 30 times, horrible 14 times, weak 13 times, and other names, and criticizing foreign leaders, journalists, and so-called anchor babies. The spectre of violence looms over much of his speech, which is infused with words like kill, destroy, and fight. Uses rhetoric to erode people's trust in facts, numbers, nuance, government, and the news media. According to specialists in political rhetoric, nobody knows, he likes to declare, where illegal immigrants are coming from or the rate of increase of healthcare premiums under the Affordable Care Act, even though government agencies collect and publish this information. And as much as he likes the word attack, the Times analysis shows he often uses it to portray himself as a victim of cable news channels and newspapers that he says do not show the size of his crowds. This pattern of elevating emotional appeals over rational ones is a rhetorical style that historians, psychologists, and political scientists placed in the tradition of political figures like Goldwater, George Wallace, Joseph McCarthy, Huey Long, and Pat Buchanan, who used fiery language to try to win favor with struggling or scared Americans. His entire campaign is run like a demagogue's. His language of division, his cult of personality, his manner of categorizing and maligning people with a broad brush. If you're an illegal immigrant, you're a loser. If you're captured in war like John McCain, you're a loser. If you have a disability, you're a loser. It's rhetoric like Wallace's. It's not a kind or generous rhetoric. There is a looseness to his language that sounds almost like water cooler talk or neighborly banter, regardless of what it is about. Trump has said he will tear into anyone who tries to take him on, and he presents himself as someone who is always right in his opinions, even prophetic, a visionary. It is the sort of trust me and only me rhetoric that, according to historians, demagogues have used to insist that they have unique qualities that can lead the country through turmoil. All of them are weak. They're just weak, he said in New Hampshire on Tuesday of his fellow candidates. I think they're weak generally. You want to know the truth, but I won't say that because I don't want to have any controversies. So I refuse to say that they're weak generally, okay? Some of them are fine people, but they are weak. And then took me back to that clip about the snake, and there's a short link from Frontline PBS, which really is a quite extraordinary resource, I must say. 22nd of July, in an article called The Showdown, I said Trump has already established his credentials as a linguistic warfare specialist. Look at the names he gave his opponents: Crooked Hillary, Lying Ted, Little Marco, Low Energy Jeb, which were devastating and terminal. His linguistics actually derive from the world of wrestling, and between 1998 and 2013 he ran wrestling events, appeared ringside, notably in the Battle of the Billionaires, and was even inducted into the World Wrestling Entertainment Hall of Fame. Then, despite being presented as a competitive sport, professional wrestling is scripted. The competitors' results, pre-match and post-match interviews, all of it is make-believe. The broadcasters give their audience all the things you'd expect in a work of fiction: backstory, suspense, symbolism, and so forth. This is the Financial Times' Stephen Gross. In wrestling, as in literature, names are never neutral. Naming a character is an essential part of creating them. There's always a face, short for baby face or hero, and a heel, a villain. Hulk Hogan and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson are faces. Jake the Snake Roberts and Rick Rude are heels. Wrestling pits good against bad, a genuine He-Man against a phony rascal. To emasculate his opponents, Trump uses this trope: low energy Jeb, Mr. Magoo, lying James Comey, the rat Michael Cohen, highly conflicted Bob Mueller. He tweets in wrestling speak: lightweight Marco Rubio was working hard last night. The problem, he is a choker, once a choker, always a choker, meltdown. And then in that article I was writing about, it was about the four wicked witches that he described. That was AOC, Clyde, Omar, and Presley. And it took me back to Paul Virilio: images contaminate us like a virus. That's 5th of December. I said he was a linguistic warfare specialist, and that the names he gave his opponents, Crooked Hillary, Lying Ted, Little Marco, Low Energy Jeb, were devastating and terminal. And then I take you back to September 2012. I was quoting an article in the American College Quarterly from 1997, and it says information warfare will not be couched in the rationale of geopolitics, but will be spawned like any Hollywood drama out of raw emotions. One of the defining bifurcations of the future will be the conflict between information masters and information victims. Information warfare will not be couched in the rationale of geopolitics, but will be spawned, like any Hollywood drama, out of raw emotions, hatred, jealousy, and greed. Emotions rather than strategy will set the terms of information warfare struggles. It's no use fighting elections on the facts, it's all about emotions. Andrew Nix of Cambridge Analytica. And that in that article I was quoting Beppe Grillo, traditional media has been disrupted and the insurgents have been broadcast live and over the top, and from feeding the hothouse conspiracy frenzy online, maintain a constant state of destabilized perception. A year of protests sparked change around the globe is a headlined article in Bloomberg. Economies on the verge of collapse, a yearning for greater democracy, revulsion against corruption and inequality, grievances that drove people into the streets in 2019 were consistent across continents. Then talking about worldwide push for more urgent government action against a climate emergency, America, protests in Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, Europe, Scotland, UK, France, Catalonia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Russia, Africa and the Middle East, Algeria, Lebanon, Sudan, Iran, Malawi, South Africa, East Asia and Oceania, South Korea, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Papua. And I wrote about this in an article called The New Economy of Anger. And in that I started by quoting Virilio, the revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor machine of attack, in other words, a producer of speed. And I said there, the phenomenon about which I'm speaking is not limited to Latin America, WhatsApp, Lebanon, Hong Kong, Iraq, Algeria. And I said the phenomenon is spreading like wildfire in large part because of the tinder-dry conditions underfoot, prolonged standoffs, eviscerate economies, reducing opportunities, and accelerate the negative feedback loop. Antonio Gramsci, the crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Now is the time of monsters. I quoted Kapuscinski, who said, if the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. And I said, it is not over. More and more people are gathering in the streets, and I think that Bloomberg article confirms it. Chouting Agnes tweeted photographs of the last march in Hong Kong. Have a look at it. I mean, the numbers just are not coming off. Library in Gansu announces burning illegal, religious and deviant materials in order to fully exert library's central role in broadcasting ideology through mainstream society. This is so Hitlerian, it's unbelievable. And that news is ricocheting through Chinese social media. As I said, the Chinese dream has become a nightmare at the boundaries of the Han Empire. This is Vincent Street, which I assume is in Australia, and you will certainly agree that there's a fin de siècle, an even apocalyptic mood afoot. As I said, the conundrum for those who wish to bet on the end of the world is this: what would be the point? The world would have ended. And I was quoting W.B. Yeats, The Second Coming, turning and turning in the widening jar. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. I take you back now to Beppe Grillo, who said this is the deflagration of an epoch. It's the apocalypse of this information system, of the TVs, of the big newspapers, of the intellectuals, of the journalists. And what he meant was traditional media has been disrupted and the insurgents can broadcast live and over the top. And Gary Kasparov says reality was whatever the party put out on the nightly news or the official newspapers. As the joke went, there is no news in the truth and no truth in the news. Denying reality became too grave an insult to our dignity, an underestimated ingredient in the spirit of revolution. Made me think. Critical reports of fake news, journalists reporting the facts are enemies of the people, a phrase from Vladimir Lenin. Debunked conspiracy theories are repeated. Public servants testifying under oath about documented events are dismissed as never Trumpers. The internet was supposed to shine the light of truth into every corner of the world, breaking the authoritarians' monopoly on information. But it has also become a light-speed delivery system of lies and propaganda. The web has been chopped into pieces like a shattered mirror. Each fragment reflects a different, distorted image instead of a single reality. Software is soft power, and US companies betray the values of the nation that enable their success by doing the bidding of dictators, he says. Trump, do not believe any article or story you read or see that uses anonymous sources having to do with trade or any other subject. Only accept information if it has an actual living name on it. The fake news media makes up many sources, say stories. Do not believe them. 1 billion surveillance cameras forecast to be watching within 2 years. This is Slashdot. The number of cameras used for surveillance would climb above 1 billion by the end of 2021, represent an almost 30% increase from the 770 million cameras today. China would continue to account for a little over half the total. That took me to Jeffrey Epstein, who had a collection of eyeballs on his wall. Z, I wrote, is building an algorithmic society. Financial Times, facial recognition, how China cornered the surveillance market. What do Uganda's police force, a Mongolian prison, and Zimbabwean airports have in common? All three are in the process of testing facial recognition systems, and all three have used Chinese technology to do it. At least 52 governments are doing the same thing. There are protests around the world, from Lebanon to Chile and Iraq. A lot of these governments, whether it's liberal democracies or more autocratic, are in tenuous positions. Now there is technology available that allows them to fight back against political mobilization. Huawei has been investing heavily in the developing world in a way their telecom provider competitors haven't. It is perfectly pitched for surveillance projects. This is Henry Tugendhat, a researcher at Johns Hopkins. Governments have an interest in security and companies have an interest in selling. I would beware of the idea that Africa is a blank slate where Chinese arrive bringing their oppressive ways. Companies are spinning their products to fit the political demands of African elites. That's all this is about. It's not about crime. It's about controlling the masses. What you're arguing with public bodies like the Beijing subway about their use of facial recognition, there's no point talking to them about data protection. And there's also the installation of an in-class facial monitoring system at the China Pharmaceutical University in Nanjing in September sparked widespread online criticism. As part of a new smart campus system, the school installed face scanners in 2 classrooms to track attendance and to catch students dozing, playing on their phones and talking in class. It effectively solves the difficult problems of managing attendance and low efficiency, the school says. Huawei claims that its surveillance cameras in Nairobi, Kenya led to a 46% drop in crime in 2015. The US exported $120 billion of goods to China in 2018. China shipped $540 billion of goods to the US. And I said in an article in May 2019, this disequilibrium is the overarching point. And I was also saying that the US economy is in fact more of an island economy than China's. China exports to the US were down a whopping 23% year on year, according to JS Blockland. Imports from the US rose for the first time since August last year, up 2.7% year on year. Jacinda Ardern, you remember, warned social media companies saying they're the publisher, not just the postman. And that goes back to software's power, and US companies betray the values of nations that enable their success by doing the bidding of dictators. Epstein was a Mossad agent used to blackmail American politicians, former Israeli spy claims. Believing that Epstein planned to marry his daughter, Robert Maxwell introduced him and Ghislaine Maxwell to Mnasheed's Mossad circle. Maxwell sort of started liking him. And my theory is that Maxwell felt that this guy is going for his daughter, Mnasheed said. He felt that he could bless him with some work and help him out in like a paternal way. They were agents of the Israeli intelligence services. Mossad connection to a different kind of sex offender, also Harvey Weinstein. He was taking photos of politicians sleeping with 14-year-old girls. If you want to get it straight, they could just blackmail people. They would just blackmail people like that. BBC Panorama, the Prince and the Epstein scandal. It's really very hard-hitting. Maxwell had another thing to tell this woman. When I asked what she thought of the underage girls, she looked at me. They're nothing, these girls. They're trash. According to Tom Bauer of The Times, in 1986, Ghislaine's father invited her to visit his new yacht in a shipyard in Holland to celebrate its christening in her honor as the Lady Ghislaine. In November of 1991, Maxwell's body was found floating in the sea near the Canary Islands and his luxury yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. Immediately following his death, Ghislaine flew to Tenerife, where the yacht was stationed to attend to his business paperwork. A verdict of death by accidental drowning was recorded. Maxwell has since stated that she believes her father was murdered. He did not commit suicide. This was just not consistent with his character. I think he was murdered. Ian Robert Maxwell was born Jan Ludvík Hyman Binyamin Hoch and was a British media proprietor and member of Parliament. This is a link I found from Jake Hanrahan of drone footage shot from Jeffrey Epstein's island just as the FBI is raiding it. As I said, I'm the view that Bitcoin and crypto is a Jeffrey Edward Epstein level con. It's breathtaking. Crypto deleted, Bruce Fenton deleted a tweet where he pretty much admitted as much. Twilight had settled over the tranquil country lane when officers arrived to find the slumped frame of a middle-aged man, his dog lying dead nearby. The fatally wounded figure was Dmitry Obretetsky, a billionaire who made his fortune in the smash-and-grab chaos of post-communist Russia before moving to Britain with his wife and children. He had been walking his dog near his home in Oxshott, where we once were looking at buying a house, funnily enough, when he was mown down in a crash involving 3 vehicles. People drive very carefully in Britain, a friend of his said. Obretetsky is the latest in a string of powerful Russians to have met an untimely end after moving to Britain. Nerve agent poisoning of the former double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury last year marked a tipping point, exposing members of the British public to a deadly toxin in the first chemical weapons attack on European territory since the Second World War. Polonium poisoning of the KGB defector Alexander Litvinenko in 2006 was another case too brazen to ignore. Putin's assassination program, including state laboratories in which government scientists have developed an arsenal of nerve agents, deadly germs and radioactive poisons designed to kill without leaving a trace. Basically, the British have done very little about it. Former Maldives President M.Nasheed has been objecting to China's influence over the Maldivian economy. Satellite images also show how islands leased for commercial projects are being dredged and expanded south of India. This is a video. I'll take you back to 2018, the FOCAC Beijing summit, and where Xi Jinping made a speech, and he said, in addition, for those of Africa's least developed countries, heavily indebted and poor countries, landlocked developing countries and small island developing countries that have diplomatic relations with China. He's treating them very, very softly because of the EEZs that they control. And I tweeted on the 8th of February last year, does the Indian establishment and Modi appreciate the chokehold China has over India? They're in the Dockland Plateau, they're in Gwadar next door, Hambantota Port, and the intrusion into the Indian Ocean. International markets voting for Boris Johnson and the Tories because they'll get Brexit done is a bit like the crew members of the Titanic deciding that the iceberg doesn't exist, says James Melville, because this is, why I called it, after Lord Alfred Tennyson, the Lotus Eaters, is because it's just incredible. This whole campaign is based on falsehoods on both sides. The Lotus Eaters in the UK election, have a read of this, probably the most profound paragraph about British politics you'll read throughout this whole election campaign by Robert Crampton in the Sunday Times. Sterling, that's been moving higher, 131.70 last, and pushing on. And the market is set up for a fall, particularly if it's a hung parliament. But at the moment, the market believes that Boris is going to win this all hands down. Euro dollar 110.62, dollar index 97.652, Japanese yen 108.56, Swiss franc 0.9904, the pound 131.70. The Australian dollar 0.6834, India rupee 71.145, South Korean won 1190.13, Brazilian real has improved a little bit more, 4.1435, Egyptian pound 16.1357, and the rand 14.616, and that's 14.6116. It's done rather well. Dollar index, this chart is from Simple Trends, who's expecting a bounce. This is the euro-dollar chart from FX Pip Titan, last at 110.63. Commodity markets, crude oil has been playing out perfectly, oval to oval, says Joe Friday, 714. We're currently at $58.82, having got very close to 60. Gold, 1462.50. Iron ore in China surged nearly 6% to hit the highest level since August. That's from Yuan Talks. And I didn't know this, but India's daily requirement of onions is about 50,000 metric tons. And a family of 5 consumes 4.75 kilos of onions on a monthly basis. Time to big up the dosage of Quaaludes was my article. I could have written about the banana, which was duct taped to a wall at Art Basel, Miami Beach, sold for $120,000 and then eaten by a fellow called David Datuna. Perotin gallery spokesman Lucien Terra told the Herald that Datuna did not destroy the artwork because the banana is the idea. I could have written about how the president's free lawyer took Wizz Air to Ukraine for all the criming. That's Molly John Fust. However, what with the Victoria Falls, now a trickle, a famine ravaging the land in southern Africa, floods and desert locust swarms in eastern Africa, buildings collapsing in Nairobi, you might find yourself turning to the Bible and reading verses about the signs of the end times. Luke 21:11, there will be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and pestilences, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. Revelation 6:12-13, when he opened the 6th seal, I looked and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. And then you might cast your mind back a few years and recall the IMF's Africa Rising conference in 2014 when I quaffed the most flavoursome tiger prawns, and in between mouthfuls the conversation was all about how Africa was finally rising, and the fund managers from far and wide was salivating at double-digit local currency yields, and life was hunky-dory and so peachy. What we know now, and that's after the tuna bond scandal, is we were all popping Quaaludes. Quaaludes promote relaxation, sleepiness, and sometimes a feeling of euphoria. It causes a drop in blood pressure and slows the pulse rate. These properties are the reason why it was initially thought to be a useful sedative and anxiolytic. It became a recreational drug due to its euphoric effect. Today, wherever you care to look, there are a few exceptions, Egypt is one, Côte d'Ivoire another, we're looking at the decay of that colossal wreck. This week, Moodys Investor Services downgraded Nigeria to negative, and we learned that foreign investors are propping up the Naira to the tune of $16 billion via short-term certificates. Everyone knows how this story ends. When the music stops, everyone will dash for the exit, and the currency will collapse, just like it's collapsing in Lusaka as we speak. Nigeria matters, and it has not posted positive GDP growth above its population growth for a number of years. Essentially, Baba Goslo's Nigeria is in reverse gear, as is Ramaphosa's South Africa, which reported minus 0.6 Q3 2019 GDP. President Ramaphosa, however, was awarded with the Grand Croix de l'Ordre National du Mérite on behalf of the Grand Master, His Excellency President Alpha Condé of the Republic of Guinea. The two biggest beasts in sub-Saharan Africa are essentially providing fewer opportunities, and their citizens have been becoming worse off year after year for more than 5 years now. What is also clear is that currencies represent the best proxy. Bloomberg reported last week that the Ghana's cedi is headed for its 25th straight year of depreciation against the dollar. The cedi is down 13% so far in 2019, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. Decades of high inflation led to a redenomination in 2007, when the new cedi was phased out and replaced by the current currency at a ratio of 1 to 10,000. It has since lost about 80% of its value. And Ghana is often touted as a success story. Bloomberg was also reporting on Friday that Zambia's kwacha fell the most against the dollar in 4 years and may continue to slide to record lows as panic buying of the US currency sets in, according to FNB Zambia. The currency depreciated by as much as 5.3% to 15.5750 per dollar, bringing its drop so far this year to 21% and making it the world's third worst performer in 2019. Thursday was the first time it reached 15. Zambia's economy has been ravaged by the regional drought and repeated budget deficits that have sent government debt soaring. Economic growth won't reach 2% this year, according to the IMF. Sovereign debt will end 2019 at 91.6% of GDP. Currency weakness makes servicing foreign loans more costly and could also drive up inflation, which is already at 10.8%. The kwacha's depreciation is regrettable, and the central bank is looking at ways to arrest the slide, Vice President Nonge told lawmakers on Friday in Lusaka. They are still popping Quaaludes in Lusaka. Stratfor has headlined their latest article about Zimbabwe as follows: as the economy worsens, Zimbabwe teeters on the edge of chaos. And the first sentence reads, with an increasingly cash-strapped and hungry citizenry, the survival of Zimbabwe's current government will hinge heavily on keeping its security forces paid and happy. Here in Kenya, David Ndii headlines his latest opinion piece in The Elephant. An IMF straitjacket is a fitting end to Jubilee's reign of hubris, blunder, plunder, squander, and abracadabra. Meanwhile, Jack Ma beats the drum of the African entrepreneur, and I will just quote Howard French. Be candid. What's really at stake here? Interest of players like these is really harvesting eyeballs, coins and talent from Africa, the purses of the biggest demographic pool of the 21st century. Hervé Gogo can have the final word. It's a big tragedy indeed for Zimbabweans and for the continent, but conspiracy theorists living mainly overseas will always find a reason to accuse the other of being responsible for this self-inflicted catastrophe. Naipaul would have called them some Kunta Kinte Monke. Time to big up the dosage of Quaaludes. The idea that Africa is going to drown in debt is nonsensical. That's Donald Kaberuka, the former president of the African Development Bank, via NTV. I said it's just plain irresponsible to be making comments like that. Stratfor, as the economy worsens, Zimbabwe teeters on the edge of chaos. 21st of January, I was saying the mind game that ZANU-PF played on its citizens has evaporated in a puff of smoke. President Emmerson Mnangagwa officially opened a new-look canteen at the ZANU-PF headquarters, and really it is, as I said, a tipping point moment. The kwacha fell the most in 4 years, with more pain in store. The fear of the rate running away may cause panic buying, while sellers are likely to step aside as they see their kwacha values increase, exacerbating the situation. As I said, the canary in the coal mine is Zambia. I said that in October, but I've also said this was an accident just waiting to happen. The president is saying external agents are stirring up unrest to force regime change in Zambia. Oh well. Ethiopia, it is still reasonable to expect that we can export our way out of the forex crisis. Look at the export ratio to GDP. That's from Precise Consult. Californian video gamers use more electricity than nearly 100 million people in Ethiopia. That's Charlie Robertson. South African all shares up 4.87% year to date. Dollar rand last at 14.61. Egyptian pound 16.1395. EGX 30 up 3.51% year to date. The US is watching, the world is watching. This is unacceptable. This is the US Senator Menendez condemning President Buhari on the rearrest of Sowore. There's been a lot of drama in Nigeria. 18th of February, I was writing about Nigeria decides, quoting Ben Okri, we dream of a new politics that will renew the world under their weary, suspicious gaze. There's always a new way, a better way that's not been tried before. The Nigerian all shares down 14.56% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 12.06% year to date. This is a quote from Idi Amin. I do not want to be controlled by any superpower. I myself consider myself the most powerful figure in the world, and that is why I do not let any superpower control me, he said. The US and UK are among those closely scrutinizing dealings between Uganda and North Korea in the field of biological weapons. They've got evidence to show that biological weapons were used on H.E. Bobby Wine and the previous Prime Minister, his wife. While leaders are currently at COP25, the biggest climate conference in the world, Victoria Falls has shrunk. As I said, the end is nigh, the feedback loop and the risks of dieback, where we enter a phase of cascading system collapse. What does this matter for Kenya? This is the deal that Tanzania has done with Burundi and DR Congo. The very economic raison d'etre of the SGR was that it would connect the hinterland to the port of Mombasa. The article I was referencing by David Ndii in IMF Straitjacket is a fitting end to Jubilee's reign of hubris, blunder, plunder, squander, and abracadabra. Well worth reading in full. David has been the first to call this all out, and he's given a detailed article. 4 years ago, I contemplated the Jubilee administration ending precisely where it is headed. CBK FX reserves stand at $8.752 billion, 5.43 months import cover. Current account deficit narrowed to 4.1% of GDP in the 12 months to October 2019. Knight Frank, in their Prime Global Cities Index, said that Nairobi prime property was down 5.4% 12 months through Q3 2019. Kenya T-bills, 91 days at 7.1%, 182 days at 8.2%, 364 days at 9.8%. That's via Cyton, but there's been a trend of undersubscription. 2018 Eurobond issue, the 10 years at 6.6, the 30 year at 8.1% in dollars. 2019 7-year Eurobond at 6.3%, 12-year Eurobond at 7.4%. NSE is trading at a PE ratio of 12.1 and a dividend yield of 5.9. Nairobi all shares up 14.14% so far this year. NSE 20s down 7.49% so far this year. Chinese Navy ship, the Weifang, has docked in Kenya after taking part in the China-Russia-South Africa Maritime Joint Mission in South Africa. Thank you for stopping by.